Welcome back to On Texas Football. For this week's recruiting breakdown, I'm CJ Vogel, joined as always by Gerry Hamilton. 15 days away from December 4th, Gerry. It's coming up quick. A lot yet to remain for the Texas Longhorns and, other teams across the country. We saw some movement that helped move the Longhorns up from number 6 to number 5 to number 4 as Texas sits right now with 23 commits in the class. They're number 4 in the composite rankings. Right now, the only teams ahead of the Longhorns as we go down these final 2 weeks or so are Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama. Pretty good company in the recruiting world. But let me get your thoughts as we kind of inch up closer and closer here. What's left for the Longhorns and anything at top of mind, maybe not so immediately, but something to keep an eye on here as well.
Yeah, I think there's been more late QB movement nationally than we've seen in a while, right? With Julian Lewis decommitting, Longstreet decommitting from A&M, flipping to USC. What's going to do tonight is already flipped from Notre Dame to Auburn. Now Ole Miss is in the picture. I mean, there's a lot going on in quarterback recruiting, which shuffles class rankings quite a bit. And definitely can. So that's worth watching. Ohio State had a decommitment from a 5-star edge the other day. So there's some things affecting these class rankings right now outside of what Texas is doing with all this movement late. I think Texas is in a great spot. Obviously, they're going to sign a 4th straight top 5 class. I don't think we have any doubts about that. The question is, what's their ceiling with this class? And it feels like if they were to domino here, 2 might be their class ceiling with what's left out there for Georgia and other people. But it looks like 2 could be the ceiling. And look, Texas hasn't signed. Sark has signed a number 3 class and 4 class and 5 class, I think, the last 3 years. Well, 2 would be the best class, arguably, right? The highest ranked class. Now, that number 3 class had Arch Manning, Anthony Hill, Manny Muhammad, the departed John Tay Cook, a bunch of guys in that class. But look, this class has the ability to finish number 2. I think 3 or 2 is where things are headed right now, as long as Texas holds on to everybody committed.
And that's going to be the big point, right? You mentioned flips at the quarterback position. There's also flips that Texas is hoping to get on the defensive line, the offensive line, trying to hold on to some wide receivers and some players in the rest of their class year. Before we dive into what's left with a Michael Fasusi, a Jamie Ffrench, even a Zion Williams, a quick word about Mark Saunders and Allstate, the sponsor for this week's recruiting breakdown.
Yeah, man, when it comes to protecting all your stuff, Texas fans, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Well, I got great news for you, man. That's Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders, serving the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you'll need. Take it from the hundreds of On Texas Football family members that have called Mark Saunders at 512-218-8571. When I say everything you need, that's everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Once again, call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. That's Austin, Round Rock areas, and all of Texas. Texas alum Mark Saunders. Give him a ring.
Thank you, Mark Saunders and Allstate, for sponsoring the recruiting breakdown. Gerry, I wanted to get to you first because you broke some big news earlier in the week about a 5-star offensive tackle from the DFW area, currently committed to Oklahoma. Tell folks real quick about that news and what's left in that recruitment.
Yeah, Michael Fasusi's told On Texas Football that he's going to be at the Kentucky game Saturday, and that's major, not kind of. It's major news, right? A 5-star offensive tackle committed to Oklahoma from DFW, visiting Texas for the Kentucky game. We've been saying on Texas Football, CJ, yourself, myself, that the communication had picked up in recent weeks. There was none the first few weeks of the season. It's really picked up. That's not just for Texas, but for Texas A&M as well. But Kyle Flood's been on Michael Fasusi a long time. And now he told On Texas Football, we broke that news, like you said, that he's planning to be at the Kentucky game. Why is that impactful? Because Oklahoma's hosting Alabama. I mean, it'd be one thing if Oklahoma was playing on the road, but he's choosing to come to Texas, Kentucky over Alabama in Norman.
Right.
If you're an Oklahoma fan, you're not feeling good right now. Bottom line, you are not feeling good about that. And then Fasusi also said he's going to be at the A&M Texas game at the end of the year. Now, that would be as a guest of Texas A&M. The question with A&M is, because I think Lamont Rogers is going to go to A&M. So could you get Lamont Rogers and Fasusi? Now, I don't know. A mixed bag. I think they could try, but I'm not sure they will. I'm not sure A&M thinks they could, but they'll try. But if you assume Lamont Rogers goes to A&M, then things could break really well for Texas with Fasusi coming down the stretcher. So we'll have to see what happens. But if he follows through and makes the visits the next 2 weekends, that's the Texas for the Kentucky game, which turning down Alabama, the Alabama-Oklahoma game in Norman, and then A&M Texas game. That is just not a good sign for the Sooners actually signing Michael Fasusi. And he's in a tough spot, CJ, because he doesn't know who his OC is going to be. He doesn't know who his offensive line coach is going to be. And December 4th, like you said, is 15, 16 days away. He's reporting to a college. He is moving in somewhere January 13th, 14th, or 15th. There's not a lot of time here for him.
Yeah, it's coming quick. And the one thing I want to kind of err on the side of caution with Fasusi is this. It's great that he's taken the visit.
Yeah.
Let's see what that word is out of Louisville after the College Station visit as well, because don't discount Texas A&M and what they're doing in this class as well. They were a big-time player for this commitment whenever he originally committed to Oklahoma and have stuck around as well, even with the pursuit of Lamont Rogers as well. Jerry, I wanted to ask you this because Texas does have 5 offensive linemen in the class. You've always said, and I think we've seen it kind of play out as the cycles progressed, is Texas would take a 6th if it's the right 6th.
Right guy.
That would be Michael Fasusi. Is that something to keep an eye on for other commits in the class as well? As if this class gets a bit larger, maybe you have to keep fighting to hold on to everybody?
You know, I don't think on the offensive line. Obviously, there's some guys that other schools are fighting for, and we'll have to and we'll discuss that here coming up. But I don't think on the offensive line. I think those guys are locked in. I think Flood was up front, very up front, saying, "Look, 6 could be the number, maybe 5, maybe 6 in this class." So I think the bigger thing is if Texas ended up with 6 in this class, how does that affect their number in 2026? Does that go from 5 to 4? And that will be interesting because 2026 is loaded in the state of Texas on the offensive line, loaded.
Yeah, really good class coming up in 26. Speaking of 26, we just saw a reclassification for one of the Texas commits in the 26 class of 2025. That's Zelus Hicks. Of course, he will now be signing later on in about 15 days as well. But we'll also be on campus this weekend for his official visit. Jerry, what's the latest on Zelus Hicks and some teams trying to pry him away from Texas?
Well, that's big that he's making his official this weekend because the last 3 weekends he's been at Tennessee, Georgia Tech, and Florida, right? So he is making his rounds. These schools, as he should do, by the way, now that he's reclassed, his recruitment's coming to an end, and the colleges now feel the pressure of knowing his recruitment is going to come to an end earlier than expected. So it's huge that Texas gets him on campus here on the 23rd. 15 days before signing day with his family. That'll be their second trip this season. They were at the Georgia game as well. So big for Texas to get this official visit and see if they can get this thing locked down, which things are trending that way, but you still got to get to the finish line on all these recruitments, but things are trending well.
Of course, trending well also means starting to trend again, perhaps. And for that reason, I wanted to move over to Zion Williams out of Lufkin, the big defensive lineman, currently committed to LSU, has been locked in with Bo Davis over there for quite some time now, I believe since the early parts of July. But it sounds like there's been more of an increase of communication between Texas and Zion Williams. Well,
we kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but Zion and Kenny Baker talked about once a week throughout the season, right? And they continue to stay in contact. I don't think Texas was the only one staying in contact with Zion Williams, right?
Right.
At TCU as well, right? Maybe A&M a little bit. But, now there's at least a 50-50 shot that Zion makes an official visit this weekend. And we're going to wait on this to see if he actually shows up on campus. But even if he does, there's some big hurdles for Texas to get over on this. I mean, I want to be clear on this. We're not sitting here saying if he shows up that we're not thinking this is the same as Fasusi right now, that Fasusi has a legitimate different type of decision to make potentially. Zion Williams' girlfriend goes to LSU. He's very, very close with his girlfriend's family. So there's some major hurdles for Texas in their pursuit of Zion and everybody's pursuit of Zion. The second his longtime girlfriend enrolled at LSU, and he spends a lot of time with her family as well. So there's some things there that are going to be tough for Texas or any college to overcome. But we're putting it at least 50-50 that Zion makes an official visit to Texas. And the reason he could is he never made an official visit before. Right. So he has that official visit to Texas on the table he can still take. And we're going to say at least 50-50 he shows up in Austin Saturday. I have a Friday night playoff game against A&M Consolidated, I believe. But a Saturday, Sunday official visit, definitely possible, if not probable.
Big note there for a big human on the defensive line right there, Jerry. I wanted to pivot again over to remaining targets. And there's still a few. We mentioned Texas has 23 commits in the class. They could get up to about 27, maybe 28 if the dominoes fall their way. But a few I wanted to hit on specifically on the defensive line. That's Joseph Mbaktu and Javion Hilson as well. Tell the folks a little bit about both of them.
Yeah, I mean, Southeast region recruiting battles aren't for the faint of heart, right? And in Mbaktu that's where it's at. The former Florida commitment, he backed off that commitment. He was in Florida last weekend. I put out on Texas football a couple days ago. I think Texas is a slight favorite there. I think Florida's 2, Auburn's 3. He's cut out USC, that's Southern Cal. He's scheduled to be at Tennessee for an official this week. And if he follows through and makes that official visit, that's why I'm being a little more hesitant here, because that's a lot of visits in a condensed amount of time, and you never know what's going to happen in these recruitments. But I do think Texas is trending. I'm not sure it's just trending majorly. Texas believes there's work to be done, but Texas also likes where they sit with Joseph Mbaktu headed into these last 15 days. But you got to go close out these recruitments. Javion Hilson, one of the more interesting recruitments in my years doing this, because he's from Cocoa, Florida, and he's coming down to Texas versus Texas A&M. And that only happens if Texas makes the move to the SEC. Bottom line, but Texas and Texas A&M duking it out for a Cocoa High prospect on the Space Coast of Florida. That's one I haven't covered in my years doing this. And the key with Hilson is he's been a Texas lean for a while. He went to the A&M LSU game, and he's not one that makes an emotional decision off a game or anything like that. He's pure football, laser focus, work, and I develop. And I think that he sees both places as that as he gets closer to a decision here. The key there is Cocoa won their first round playoff game. They play Friday night against Tampa Berkeley Prep. They're favored to beat Berkeley Prep. If they beat Berkeley Prep, the question is on November 30th, will he be in College Station for his official visit to Texas A&M? That all depends on if they play a Friday night or Saturday playoff game. And that we just don't know yet. So we'll have to see there if Cocoa wins their second round game and how that affects a potential November 30th official visit. But both those guys, December 4th, CJ, is decision day for those guys when they'll announce their decision. There's also Kellen Wiley. I'm going to let you hit on Michael Terry. There's also Kellen Wiley, the linebacker out of Sefner Armwood, who I think Texas has a big lead for going into a Miami official visit this weekend. And that's the key, because Miami was the leader. Texas absolutely blew him and his family away. I think the family loves the vision and what Texas put in front of them in terms of development for Kellen as a football player, as an athlete, as a student. So we'll see how Miami comes back from that. Miami has 2 linebackers committed. They'll take 3. Will Tavares Alford out of Vero Beach, who's committed to Ohio State, flip to Miami. We'll see what happens there. That one's kind of in the fold. So Miami has those 2 linebackers, Alford and Wiley. They're still after. We think Texas is doing really well for Wiley headed into the Miami visit, but anything can change with these visits. And then CJ, Michael Terry, I think we still feel good about that. The question with Michael Terry is, you said feeling like the Kobe Black commitment every day that goes by, right? It's getting closer to signing day, So we'll see now 15 days out. Do you just go ahead and wait for signing day? You may as well.
You might as well. And at this point, I kind of believe that's going to be the case for Michael Terry. Of course, he did just have a ceremony in his gym with the cheerleaders, the band, a lot of his students and faculty around him for his Navy All-American jersey presentation. I would think it's very unlikely for that same kind of ceremony, which is expected for his commitment, to take place that soon right after the jersey presentation. Of course, Coach Ritterman over there does a great job of getting his guys to buy into the path of the team. And right now at 11-0, they're full steam ahead for what could be a run at the state championship game. I would not be, expecting another, I don't want to call it distraction, Jerry, but another kind of pop-up to occur before it needs to happen en route, or as these guys get prepared for another run deeper in the playoffs. But again, everything remains status quo from recent weeks.
Because that timeline's been all over the place, CJ. So I want to be clear. We're not sitting here saying he couldn't decide on Friday. I'm committed.
Right.
But with the timeline moving all over the place, it's been moving to the point of it. One time it looked like January during the Adidas Bowl. They backed off that. Could it have been September? Nope. October? Nope. Now we're in mid-November, and we're only 15 days away from signing day. And to CJ's point, he just had the announcement for the Adidas game last Friday. So we'll see. I just want to be clear. We're not saying it can't happen before then. We're just saying we're not hearing anything like it's imminent right now.
On the bright side, however, nothing has led me to believe that Texas is not still in that comfortable lead position for Michael Terry. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll just kind of wait and see when that decision date does come for him as well. But Jerry, real quick, I wanted to move over to a couple guys that are still committed to the Longhorns in the 2025 class, but are certainly hearing a lot more from programs over wherever the country, right? It could be BYU, Florida. We'll start with Jamie Ffrench because I think that's probably the most pressing recruit right now. Just took an official visit to Gainesville. Still locked in with Texas for now. Is that a big threat for the Longhorns, or is it still Miami that Texas needs to look out for the most?
I'm watching to see where Jamie goes this weekend. That to me will be telling. Look, if he goes down to Miami, they have a big last game visit weekend for them because they're on the road at Syracuse after this weekend. So they're like Texas. It's their last home game. They got Kellen Wiley. They got a few kids coming in. It's a big game visit weekend for them. Dallas Wilson, who's committed to Oregon, was at Florida. Miami's trying to snag him as well. So it's a big visit weekend for Miami. I'm interested to see where Jamie shows up for this Saturday because their season's over. They got upset in the playoffs last week. So if he were to return to Florida for the Ole Miss game, then the alarm bells go off. If he goes to Miami, then Texas is just sitting there battling as they should, those two home state schools who are going to make it a fight to get him out of that state by signing day. Or could he show up at Austin? I'm not saying he is, but I'm waiting to see later in the week where it looks like Jamie Ffrench will show up this weekend because I would be a little surprised if he stayed home. I'll say that a couple weeks out from signing day. So we'll see where Jamie ends up. But I think Texas still feels pretty good about it. But again, now, if he were to show up in Gainesville 2 weeks in a row, then the alarm bells would go off.
And, of course, staying in state, another one to keep a close eye on that maybe surprised some folks was Nick Townsend making the trip to College Station. That felt like it was back in January and February, Jerry, where Texas and Texas A&M were kind of pitching to both Keoti Armstrong, Nick Townsend, even Emory Winston. Hey, we're going to take two of the three. We just don't know which two of the three we want. Right now, Texas has Nick Townsend in the class, but A&M doing everything they can to pry him away.
That one was interesting because that was Jamie Ffrench, Texas knew. Josiah Sharma, Texas knew. Townsend, they didn't know. And so that always raises the alarm bell a little bit, right? When you show up at the rivals game and you don't tell the staff you're committed to ahead of time, that one gets a little more dicey. Now, Townsend is scheduled to be at Texas for the Kentucky game this weekend, but also most likely to show up at A&M for the Texas A&M game because every kid's going to want to go to that game, right? But that would mean 2 visits to A&M in less than a month.
Right.
So then it gets to a different level of the recruitment. I still think Texas feels pretty good about this one. But again, when you're not notified ahead of time by a kid committed to you, that you're going to a visit with another. We saw it with DeAndre Robinson in the last class. Then that's a little more of an alarm bell initially. And so I think the key is getting him back on campus this weekend, having that sit down, some time spent with Nick and the family, making sure everything's good where they're at.
Real quick, there are a few visitors for the Kentucky game, especially in 26 game. 26 class. I wanted to hit on real quick, but before we get there, a quick word from Mark Saunders in Allstate, Jerry, and then we'll close this one out with your final thoughts and some visitors for this weekend.
Yeah, man, when it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? I have some great news for you. That's Texas alum, Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders, who serves Austin and Round Rock and the entire state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you'll need. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and ATV. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? You'll be in great hands. Jerry Rice hands on a slant with over more than 35 years of experience. that Mark Saunders has. Texas alum Mark Saunders. Give him a call today, 512-218-8571 if you're in the Austin or Round Rock area or in the entire state of Texas.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you again, Mark Saunders, for being the sponsor for the recruiting breakdown. Two guys I wanted to mention real quick in the 2026 class that will be on campus for the Texas-Kentucky game in Austin. The first is Zayden Crimpin, offensive lineman out of Prosper, 2026 offensive lineman. Really talented kid, has been in contact with Coach Kyle Flood, as well as Coach Darren Gatewood, who does a tremendous job behind the scenes, especially with some of these 2026 prospects. He's in there with Katoa, John Turntine as well. He will be on campus. Texas and Crimpin have had a really strong relationship early on in this recruitment, and he was on campus earlier this year for the Georgia game. The other is Sean Scott, kind of an edge, hybrid outside linebacker guy out of Modern Day. He can go a little bit. National top 200 prospect out on the West Coast. He will be making a trip back to Austin again. He's been to campus 3 times this season. This calendar year, not season specifically, but he will be on campus for the game against Kentucky as well, Jerry. So 2 really important 2026 prospects to keep an eye on as well. But before we get out of here, one final thought I wanted to leave you with. In the world of NIL, is this kind of how you're expecting this kind of final month to go? Are there still some hurdles that need to be overcome by Texas and other programs to fill out their class, maybe that aren't so public to the common folk?
Yeah, I think in the NIL day and age, this is exactly how you think it would play out. I mean, look, the crazy thing about recruiting is, and I don't blame any of the kids, families, anything. I want to be clear about that. The interesting thing in recruiting nowadays is the recruiting calendar is so accelerated, right, that these kids are making decisions in July before their senior season. So, they go through the junior day visits in January, the game visits their junior year, then get in the official visit process. Then they commit to a school in July or early August before their senior season. Well, that leaves August, September, or October, 3 months for these schools to know where these kids are committed and who has the X on their back, right? And so from an NIL perspective, whether that's potential coaching change, things going on with some programs, position coaches, what have you, that's a long time. So if you have 20, 21 guys, 22 guys committed, let's just say 20, 21 guys committed, which most colleges do, the major schools, on first week in August, all 21 of those guys aren't just going to stay home all season long and not answer the phone and not listen to a great NIL offer out there. That's just not realistic. And especially if you recruit a lot of out-of-state kids, which Texas does, or you recruit nationally. Look at how much has changed in like an Alabama class, which is ranked 2. They've had multiple guys commit, decommit to them from other places. They lost Caleb Cunningham. I mean, it's part of the game. So that's what we have to expect in the NIL day and age. And look, I think the biggest battles for Texas are in the state of Florida, as they should be. I mean, Texas has gone in, and they're not just getting players from Florida. They're getting really high-level players from Florida. And if there's not battles from Miami or Florida or Florida State for C.J. Baxter's and Jarrett Gibson's and Myron Charles and Jamie French's of the world, I'm sure Miami will try to make a run at Dia Bell at some point. I mean, those guys really aren't doing their jobs. I would be more disappointed if they didn't make runs at these guys.
It's the same as Texas fans and Texas staffers trying to pursue a Devin Sanchez, a Dorian Brew, some of the guys in the state. So trying to put that in a Texas
how many flips has Sark had it since he's been at Texas? I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, it goes both ways. And I always jokingly say, gird up your loins. You got 2 weeks left. Gird them up.
2 weeks to go, and then we'll be sitting here for probably a 6 or 7 hour live stream for National Signing Day. So buckle up, Texas fans, because we'll have it all covered for you here On Texas Football, the YouTube channel. But come join us on ontexasfootball.com as well for all the latest breaking news in the recruiting world from Gerry Hamilton and myself. But for Mark Saunders and Allstate, this has been the On Texas Football recruiting breakdown. Y'all have a good one until next weekend. Hook 'em.